Going.
Am I live?
Yes.
Or is this thing on, as they say?
Not on the camera to see if it's on.
Hello, hello. Kind
Ciao.
signal. Ciao.
Should I fetch people?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
Maybe there's a way for connecting to. Yeah.
And
Should I-
tell people where you are, sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Sure. So while I wait for the rest of the people here, we're gonna start with we're gonna introduce development, Plone 7 development. That means a brief introduction to React Router 7, what it is, the basic functionality, and well, the basic things to know in order to develop 7. And that's important to me because it's what I'll try to show is what is in the framework that's React Router 7 and what we built on top of it. And in order for people to know, for you to know what's in the framework and what's in Plone. And I think that's important, so you know where to find things, in which documentation you can find things, and that sort of things. I am here at Beethoven Sprint in Bonn, currently waiting a little bit to also connect to the screen, or yes, showing this to people that are in the room. I will show a little bit of the documentation and a lot more of the code. Yep, there's plenty of people here.
Such quality.
Yes, that's huge quality. Well, I mean, it's gonna be fine. You don't really need to see my face or Eriko's face. Yeah, well. Okay. So let me show, yes, the docs. The React Router docs are the reactrouter.com, and Google will know, or any search engine will know if you look that up, because it's kind of a big thing now. I want to explicitly show the docs because it has a couple things that, in my opinion, could be improved. So I'll show you around a little bit. This is the home page. When I click docs, I'll go to the documentation, and it will start by asking a question, which is not so common. It says React Router is a thing. It's a library. It's a framework. It's something that can be used to build an application in 3 different modes. The one we're interested in is the framework mode. It's important to know that. Declarative mode, just small introduction. Declarative mode is React Router used just like the old way, just like the declaring the routes on the JavaScript side, and basically client side routing, or maybe it does something on the server side, I'm not sure, but it's just declaring routes and doing that. Data mode has all the server functions to load data based on the route and all of that, and just that. And framework mode is everything. So it takes care of rendering React on the server, on the client, all the hydration, and all the running things on the server. I'm gonna go into a little more detail. And so it basically is a full-fledged framework for doing JavaScript applications.
Is it fair to say that in framework mode it's kind of handling similar things to what Razzle was doing before?
Yes, and so it's the same concept idea. Of course, this is a lot more things than Razzle, but yes.
Yeah, in terms of doing both server side and client side.
Yes, exactly. It is working in a similar way for the rendering part, and then it does more things. But yeah. So the documentation is it has the introduction here, asking you to pick one of the modes, and then if you see the left column here is the most important one. There's documentation, like basic documentation for each mode, with the very basics. I'm not going through all of it. Actually, I'm going through none of it. So framework mode has all the basics for routing, data loading, whatever, navigation, etc. And then there's the most important part of it, which is what you regularly use when you are building things with it. It's everything that's below that, like the documentation regarding all the API of the framework, all the hooks that are available. You don't need to know all of this by heart. There's very few concepts that you need to be able to begin working with 7. And of course, when you're building like a full-fledged application, one at a time, you will need more functionality, navigation, revalidation, redirection, all of the things that we normally do when we build stuff, right? But for now, I will try to focus on the important pieces to be able to take on your first issue or write your first components routes for 7. So creating a project, which I won't do now because I did it already, so I'll save some bandwidth. Hopefully. Is a simple command, like with almost every framework nowadays. And when you run that, you get, and let me change my screen sharing here. Here. You get a basic boilerplate that you will recognize as being one of the pieces of 7 as well. So I need to find my Visual Studio Code window here. This one. Yes. Okay. Okay, so you created, say that you created the application. This is zoom. This is what you get. Is it sharing the thingy? Maybe. Okay, thank you. Okay, this is what you get. So it's a quite simple repo compared to what you see out there from time to time. It has the regular configuration files. I won't go into detail there. The two important pieces are the public folder, which is the regular public folder where you put static files like logos, sometimes, I don't know, whatever you need to put there. And the app folder. The app folder is the folder where the application code will be. One important thing is the route. First thing we're going to see is the routes file. The routes file looks very simple because it comes with just one simple route configured, but it's where you define every route of your application by using TypeScript code. And this is one of the building blocks of 7. That means we did something that is capable of reading routes from add-ons. So in 7, this will be slightly different. So routes is an array of things, and it will be loaded for you from add-ons. So if you want, you can define your own routes in add-ons. It has index is a special thing saying, hey, this is the index of the application. Then you will have several other options, and I'll show you briefly when we go into 7. But this is the file where you declare the routes. And this will be mandatory in every project application, and in the future, very likely pre-built by CookiePlone or whatever tool we will use to create a project for you. So unless you're doing something fancy, you won't need to do custom things with this, or at least that's what we expect. CSS file is CSS, so this comes with Tailwind out of the box, but it's just what the boilerplate is. And then there's a root file. The root file is the root file is the layout of the application. That means it contains the very basic skeleton of the application by default. This has custom components, meta, links, scripts that inject all meta information, all links, that's the link tags, and the script tags, whatever you define in your routes, that you can have multiple routes for each page load. I'll go into that later. They will be collected and put in the head or at the end of the body right there for you. And this we also customized in Plone because, of course, languages is not static, is something that we have to read from the backend in our situation. So this has been customized a little bit in Plone, but it's like that. And then we have an example. So each the root file is a route file. Route file are special files, that the ones that are linked in the let me open that. The ones that are linked in the routes file. So this is literally the path to the file. So each of these files will have the capability of a route, which is it can contain a bunch of exports to define things. First of all, it will have links, and so as a means to add CSS or whatever a link is, like connecting to fonts, whatever. It can have a meta tag with additional meta information, which we'll see is going to be, I don't know, the title of the page based on the content that's coming from the backend. It's going to be everything that's meta. And then it will have, I'm checking the quality here. Okay, better. And then it will have an export that's an error boundary. Each route can have one, and that will catch errors, and you can work with that to render some like proper errors on the page. This is so each route can render its own links, its own meta information, its own error boundary. And let me show you another example here. Yes, this is an example of meta, and it will that has the title and the name. It will show up at some point. Okay, title and the name. It defines what's in your HTML in the end. And what you actually render in the route is the default export. And this is just rendering a welcome. This is a regular React component. This is just React. This is the basics of how to create pages, how to create a standard application. And then there's a couple of additional concepts. Let me see if there's one Now, do we have? Okay, I will move directly to 7 so I can show you the additional things here. Should be this one. Editor is not helping. Where is it? Okay. 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 So, if I move to the actual route that we have in 7, we can see a couple very important extra exports there. One being the loader function. The loader function is where on the server you load things, you load all the data that you need for your page to correctly render. So that means, for example, getting Plone client here and then using it to get the current context from the backend. And the loader function is always and only run on the server. So all code in here will be Node.js code and only running on the server. It will not even be, it won't be bundled for the client. So it will be removed from the client bundle. And this will always be run on the server, and then it will render the default export, which is somewhere. Oh, well, I'm exporting a layout here because it's the root, but it's the same concept. It will render the default export, so the JSX components, and on the server, and those will be hydrated and re-rendered on the client. But the loader will only be run on the server. And the first and one of the most important policies here that we have is we only want to talk to the backend on the server. So Plone client will be used in server-side only functions. So loader is the one that we'll use to get data from the backend. And there will be means to get data from the blocks, and this is work in progress. So I don't have, it's not that I don't want to tell you, I don't have details about it. But this is where we will be doing the fetching from the backend, and then the React part of the route will be just rendering content. This is a policy that we think is best, of course, since we are using a framework that allows everything in your project. You can do whatever you want. It's your project. But this is the policy that we would like to have for the core.
It's worth to say how it compares to Volta, right?
Yeah, so yeah, it's worth to mention how it compares to Volta. Yes. So the thing is, we have these loaders running on the server, and it's also, there is also another function that I'll show later that runs when you submit forms, for example. The idea is that by not interacting with the backend, by not interacting with the backend on the browser, we are not exposing. Well, we allow you the option to avoid exposing the backend to the web, for example, on the internet, and all the configurations, API paths, any secrets, anything that you might need to talk to the backend are just stored and used on the server and never sent to the browser. Those are one of the key things. And you won't be fetching things from the React code. Well, as I said, you can, of course, but in core, we'll try to avoid that.
I can see the usefulness of being able to work that way. It seems like one trade-off would be maybe harder to debug what's coming from the API because you can't see it in the network tab.
That is an interesting question. So debugging is more difficult, yes, especially since these framework, but also Next.js and other frameworks tend to make your requests to the backend, to not the backend, but the node server here, a little obfuscated with their optimizations and sometimes serialization of data and all of that.
Yeah, I don't really want to look at hydrated React components. I want to see.
Yeah. The good thing here is that we have control over these loaders, and by using debugging terminals, you can actually put debuggers in the server code here, which was not fully working or not really enjoyable with Razzle. On the other hand, I can see this being possibly a bigger issue if you want to see what's happening in production servers or stuff like that. Right? Yes, for sure. It's going to be a trade-off of logging things on the server side of things, probably. So the loader is the one in charge of loading data. That means whenever you request a page with a GET request on your browser or whatever means, the loader will be run on the server, and it will do whatever you told it, like get the content here, and then if there's a JSX export, like it regularly is, it will pass the data to the component, render the component, and give you HTML and some JavaScript along with it for the React part. The interesting part is if you create a route without a JSX export, so with just a loader, and call that with a GET request from the browser, it will run the loader and return the data that you return from the loader. So basically, it will return this data and will skip rendering that. It will skip rendering that because it has nothing to render. So you can create routes to use as an API of sorts. Yes, that data. So you can create the routes, so like with the same methods, you can create, like, I don't know, API routes that render HTML and utility routes to fetch more data from external services, whatever it is. The other important export from a route is called action. I don't have one here, but I have one in the. Then I'll show you the project structure. But let me go through to the basic form that we have here. So this is the route for editing a page. and it has all the JSX, all the React code for rendering the form, and that's React. That's a detail for now. But this route has an action export. The action export is also something that's only run and bundled for the server, and that's where you run code when you receive something that's a request that's not a get. So a post, patch, delete, whatever it is that's not a get request, then it runs the action for the route. And that's also only run on the server, as I said, only bundled for the server. So that's where you can talk to the Plone backend, write data on the database directly, whatever. You can talk to another service. And this is, for example, an action that fires an update request to update the current context object with the JSON of the data that's coming from the form. So there's a form in the HTML, and we get the JSON and fire the update request. And it's interesting to know that every time you run an action or a loader, but that's that's less common. Every time you run an action, you can either return data, and if you return data, the framework will just revalidate and reload the page. So it will just reload the page with the updated information that your action returns. Or you can redirect, which is what we're doing here. And redirect, which is what Plone usually does, right? So you edit the content. When you save, if everything was fine, it will redirect to the view. So this is what's happening here. And React Router 7 is the web standards framework, meaning that it will usually work in a way that resembles a lot what's the web standards are. So you will see that you will have this like having these functions that are tied to request methods. You use all these redirects. So this is all very, very standard web development, which React kind of hid in the past with all the client-side rendered applications. So loaders and actions are the new concept here. Everything else is React. I can show it here. One thing you will almost always see is this specific React Router hook, which is use loader data, which is the one that gives you the data that the loader has fetched for you. And there's a counterpart for the action data. So you get the data from the loader, and everything else is React. Use fetcher is a library on top of fetch that React Router uses to submit the form here. But its use up form is from a library, and it's just React. It's Tanstack React form for in this specific instance. But just to mention, it's just another hook from another library, and then it's React everywhere, standard React. So what's the layout of Plone 7? Because these were the very basic informations that you needed to begin with the framework. Let me collapse all of these. Okay. So if you go to the 7 branch of the Volto repo, it will have an apps folder with a 7 app, which is a React Router 7 application, it's the code that will run your application. But it just contains bare bones very simple configuration to make it run. All the code is from add-ons. So it will have, as I showed you, it has a root layout, but actually it doesn't render anything because it has routes that come from add-ons. Okay. The routes file, which I am showing here, is it declares an OK route. We'll get there. It declares an OK route, which is just for health checking the application, and it gets the all other routes from add-ons. And this is a Plone registry magic. It's just some scripting that was done a few months ago. And so all the routes will come from add-ons. So that's why the root is not rendering anything, because the index is actually in another. So this is just the application running the framework and reading everything from the add-ons. So what's in the add-ons? There's a few new packages in the usual packages folder in the Volto repo, which are the blocks package, the CMS UI package, layout, public UI. What else is new? Theming, I guess. This is the 5 most important ones. So public UI is the add-on declaring where you find all the routes and the code to show content to the anonymous user, the views of your content types. So it has the index route for the application that will like render the view of your objects, of your items. The counterpart for the editors is the CMS UI. That one has the edit route. It has the login and logout routes, and it will have everything else that is editor facing. I don't know, sharing routes, history routes, translations, whatever, relations. All those routes will belong in the CMS UI add-on. This is what Victor showed yesterday. We are trying to make things in a way that they're separate, removable, replaceable. So you want a completely different theme routing system, you can also remove public UI and have your own add-on over there. Public UI will use especially layout and theming. Layout has the slots and pluggables and whatever is needed to render your application, and I'll show it briefly. And the theming nowadays has the baseline CSS for the theme. The blocks package is used by, I guess, both public UI and CMS UI. It just contains the blocks code. Simple as that. Well, hi, I guess.
Hi.
The blocks code is barely changing, meaning it has configuration with the same, let's say, schema. So it's barely changing. You could probably need a little tweaks or additions, but the idea is that they're has the same configuration that they used to have. Let me show you the slots example a little more into to show what Victor said yesterday, right? That everything is a slot nowadays. So okay, so the content route, which is the route that renders your your content items. Every item view is rendered by this one. It's 15 lines of code. And why is that? Because it's reusing the loader data that was requested by the root file of the application with this simple hook. So it will get all the content information, like the full object, and also the language information will be there. And it renders the app slot. So, which comes from Plone layout. The app slot is a proper slot, meaning you can, if you want, replace it entirely with yours in your theme. Or, I don't know, define a different app slot for a specific subpath of your website, for a specific content type, whatever. So let me show you the app slot. This one. The app slot is this. Close the terminal. Yes. The app slot renders more slots. So yes, we put slots inside slots, and I'm not going into header, main, and footer. Each and every one of these has more slots inside. So we're trying to make this as configurable as possible with the registry, and as Victor said yesterday, using less shadowing and more registry. So pointers to actually any questions so far? I'm not far from closing this and wrapping this up.
I'm wondering about what can you talk about global state, like what we have instead of Redux?
Yes. So I don't have much to show here. Well, maybe some of it, but let me go into some theory first. So most of what was in Redux was to store the responses that we got from the backend. All of that is actually had it here. All of that is now available as data from loaders from here. So loaders will actually cache locally the data that they get from, well, that you compute with the loader code, and you can always get that from even from another route, or sometimes from a component. You can get data from a loader using these hooks here, and so you can get that data, and we don't have to write boilerplate code and Redux code to use that data. Some of the Redux actions and reducers, though, were for UI state. I don't know, toolbar.
Keeping track of the user's token when they're logged in is not.
Okay, that's an interesting topic. Keeping track of the user's token is done with a cookie now. So we do have the user token in an HTTP only signed cookie, signed with a secret key that is in the React Router node server. So it's the React Router node server. I can probably show that. It's the React Router node server doing, like, getting the data from the browser, the login information from the browser, calling the login REST API endpoint, and storing when responding to the browser, storing the token in a cookie, which is signed and HTTP only.
If I'm writing a component that needs to know whether the user's logged in or not, just simply that.
It's
check that cookie, or is there some better way to do that?
It's probably going to be some info that you can get from a loader, which is from the server, which can read the cookies and your user information.
So I have to make the call to the server just to find out if I'm logged in. I guess that makes some sense if it's actually expect.
I mean, I don't know. I guess it depends on what you need to do with the, because most of the time you still need data that comes from the,
I mean, it's maybe the question. Maybe that specific example is too much of an edge case. But it's not a good example.
it's, I don't think it's really an edge case. It's just something that we didn't implement yet, which is, for example, we're always going to be showing some data from the user when somebody is logged in, right? Even if it's maybe hidden in, like in Volto, when you click your user icon, you have your name there, right? So that's user data. So that will probably end up being computed by the root loader for the application, the same one that has the content information, right? And then you can use it wherever.
Sure. You populate on the loader route, this loader, and you pass it along.
Yeah, I mean, like in Volto, if your login session with the backend expires, then it updates the Redux state once it finds out the user no longer, and whatever request happened.
In a super happy way, yes.
Yeah. So, but I mean, like, we need something like this to recognize when the user is no longer logged in. It's not going to be happening.
Well, in this case, it will happen in the right place. It will happen in the server where we really know if it's really logged in or not.
Yeah, as long as the place where you find out is happening in a loader that is trying to get that information, and it might be a loader that's trying to do something else. That's the case maybe.
So the interesting part is the root loader is always run. So the
Whenever you go to a new route.
yes, exactly.
Yeah,
So when you register routes, you will find out that you will run more than one loader, and because you will always have the root loader, and that's always run. And then you can define layouts, which is let's call it like a subsection of your website has one layout, right? Like that. Like if you had like a regular dashboard application, you have one layout for the user-facing thingy and one different layout for the settings page of your dashboard, right? So those can have different loaders, and those loaders will run in together with the root loader, and then you might nest these as with more than that, and the loaders will run in parallel, and theoretically React Router should be able to deduplicate requests that are being made if you use the regular fetch function.
I'm just realizing is that maybe this should have been obvious, but like one of the benefits of using loaders and everything happening on the server is that you don't have the thing out of Volto where you hydrate the thing and then it loads everything again.
Yes.
The server again, or hitting the backend both from the Volto server and the Volto client. But we are going to really need to figure out then how to debug and make it obvious what data is getting fetched. Because like right now, I can just look at the network tabs and be like, oh wait, we're fetching too many things, and that will be a lot less obvious unless we create a way to make it obvious. You know,
yes.
There are such tools.
Yes, yeah, for sure. There are plenty of tools in development to see all the requests that are being fired. They are by default they are logged in the terminal, all the requests, and all the loaders, all the actions that are run. They are every time they are logged in the terminal. And there's dev tools. So when you're in development mode, you will see all the loader information in your browser window. They do some magic to send that info to the browser as well if you install the DevTools plugins. So there's plenty of that. I am less aware of, but there will be tools for sure of how to log those things in production environments or whatever. it is somebody
There is a question
was.
for you. It's going to take a while to appear on the screen. So, are you sure you want to have a number in package name? I mean, 7? I still remember product 2XXX and Plone 4XXX choices in the past. All of them considered weird inferiors. It was Luca Fabri. Take a look in there. So
It's just a code name.
Yeah, so 7. Yeah. That makes sense. 7 is just a code name for now. Yes, it's not going to.
Goes. You know how it goes.
I don't. I'm fairly new around here. The idea behind 7 is that it's a code name. It's convenient that 7 is the version of Plone and the version of the framework that we're using, so it's easier to remember everything. This is a personal opinion. My idea is that what we are building is not a front-end application for Plone. We are building a framework, so a collection of libraries to build a front-end application for Plone. That means that this will be very similar to having, like what we will have in the end, will be very, very similar to having create React Router app with the Plone template, or cookie Plone, create a project, and that will create a React Router application that uses Volto as a framework to have all the connections to the backend, the rendering, the routes out of the box. I don't know if it's a subtle difference. JS with React Router 7, it's what you regularly do. Like, you don't install the application. You create a project that uses libraries to run an application. So you have, it's very clear with, I recently created an Angular application. If you create an Angular application, you own the file that imports the Express server and defines the routes there. So it's created in your project. You're not using something that does that behind the scenes. And this is how I personally envision this. So the 7 application here it's something that we use for developing all of these, but it's probably not what you're going to run eventually. But this is not for granted. I'm not sure. We'll see. Or it will be part of what you're going to run, but we'll have an application in your project doing things, I believe. But that's my personal opinion. That being said, 7 is definitely not the final name for the thing, I assume. Any other questions? Not in the chat? Okay. So, wrapping things up. React Router 7 is a framework.
I have a question.
Yes.
I couldn't follow the explanation in English to the question about Redux. Short question. How does, for example, a subcomponent like footer, how does it have access to, for example, the content? You show the content TSX. It uses the data from the loader of
Yes.
the root TSX by
Yes.
applying use route loader data, and
Yes.
then it has the content data.
Yes.
Content has several subcomponents. How do they have access to, for example, this or others? And if I have a hierarchy of subcomponents, is every loader function of the parents ancestors run? I think yes. And that
Yes.
it should have in any way have access to these returns of the loader functions.
Okay,
How
so
do I-
yes, this hook use route loader data can be used in all the components inside that. Well, every component specifically because this is calling the root loader thing. But this hook can be used in every React component, and then it can access loader data for every loader that has actually run for the page you're looking at. And this is something that cannot be checked at compile time necessarily. Well, it can be, but it's up to you to actually read data from a loader that this component that will render this component, from a root that will render this component. As we said, so in other words, you will run more than one loader eventually for each page, potentially. You can always use this hook to get data from one of those loaders.
So I add a line where I explicitly use root loader data with the name of the component of the loader I'm interested in.
Yes, yes. This
And
is the
how-
ID of the root. So root here is the ID of the route you're getting the loader data from, and the ID is set in the routes configuration file.
It's not the file name, but the ID of the root.
I think it defaults to the file
root
name.
is, okay. I'm asking this all because when I write an add-on debugging, how do I see what I could access with use route loader data?
You mean which loaders you can access? So which data?
I'm writing a component, and yeah, I need. I want to inherit some data. I can write a new loader function, but maybe I can get it from an ancestor. So how do I have to scan the code, or do
That
I
is a
have
good
a
question.
code
I'm
where
not
I
sure I
can
know the
see
answer to that.
There's a hook for that. Explore use loaders, something, whatever. And it gets an object with the keys and all the things that you have in the hierarchy of routes. I think. But we can look it up.
And you have for the moment everything in your head. You know what you could access. So you.
Yeah,
There's
it's.
a-
I think it's going to be. A lot of it will depend on how 7 will turn out to be, because most of the data that you need will actually be from the root loader because it has the context object, right? So most of it is usually in the context object, and it's probably going to be that. It's probably going to be that with the, but this is just a guess because we still have to discuss it. That the blocks can inject more things to fetch, and it will happen in the root loader as well, because we will have blocks rendered in the page, so we will, and that those blocks will need data as well. So this is something, as I said earlier, something that we still need to perfectly figure out and flesh out. But it's a discussion for this week actually that we're going to have. So a lot of the info will come from the root loader. But yeah, it's a matter of knowing. So I'm not aware of any way of getting a list of the loaders that are available, especially since we're not, as usual, doing things the regular way. We have, if you build a regular application, a standard application, you're building it yourself in one single code base, right? But we have add-ons. We have things that come from all around the world. So we don't always have all the code of the application at hand. So that is a good question, but I'm not sure there's a automatic way to know all the loaders that are there. On the other hand, everything we're doing is open source, so hey, it's what we've always done, right? Going in the source code and seeing what's happening.
Do you have time for a second one?
Yeah.
Theming. You said the basic concept of theming is that in content, public UI rules content, the app is the one who provides slots where components are injected, and the slots is the framework for my custom theme for one project. But my question is, why do you import in public goods content an app? Shouldn't it be coming from from the registry? So when I do a theme, that I register another app. That will
That is-
be injected in the public
Yes.
UI goods content.
You haven't shown the definition of the slots. Maybe you can show.
Yes, that is in the layout index here, right?
Not already. Yeah, it's already something in the registry involved, but this is an import.
If only.
I wonder why this is an
This
import and not a get from registry. Or is it under the?
So if you're
Because when I do an explicit
Yeah.
import,
Yeah.
it's this app and I cannot customize it.
this
when I
this
do not shadowing, and I don't like shadowing.
yeah, of course, if you want to No, I mean, no. I mean, if you really want to replace, yes. So the thing is, the app component that we're rendering in the main content route, there. Yeah, is imported statically. So this one is not fully replaceable with the configuration registry. What if I told you? So you are correct, definitely.
No, I think
but
it has a reason, because I tried to replace the app some days before in itself.
But it
For the red component.
Okay.
And
if you get to a point where you have to replace the whole application, so we can either make this a slot or put this in the registry. Okay. I'll get there. Or
This should not be a direct
Yeah, this
call
one.
to the app
Yes.
component. It should be a
Yes.
slot renderer.
correct. But if you get to that point, why don't you just remove the public UI add-on and replace it with your own? That's one thing you can do with 7.
I mean, this is something we need to learn or understand where we look in to customize.
Mm-hmm.
Now I see only for Volto and
Yeah.
Since now everything will be an add-on, you could
Yeah.
then replace it.
I think as soon
So
as
this will
we have
actually
add-ons,
be-
we see that,
Yeah, this will need to be a slot renderer. Okay, fair.
But yeah, the app is in there, so it's a
Yeah.
slot.
It's a slot already.
Instead of calling the app, it should be on a slot renderer.
That's correct. Thank you for pointing it
I
out.
have another question.
Yes.
I'm going to put on screen. It's going to take a while. Leonardo Cavagero is basically asking, he's stating he's not a front-end developer, he's a back-end developer now. And if he understood correctly, he needs to go full React development for Plone 7, right?
Well, not more than you need to do for Volto. It's basically, it's 2025 React knowledge instead of 2015 React knowledge, but you're still only building the front end application, and you can, it's the same, not the same amount of knowledge, but it's the same type of knowledge, right? It's front end knowledge, basically.
There's still classic Plone.
Classic Plone is still a thing, yes.
Is it?
Well, I mean,
As of today, yes.
I'm joking because the
As of
people from
today,
Classic
it's still
are on the other
a
room.
thing.
They're not here.
Yeah.
We're talking about 7.
Yeah.
But yeah,
But
I mean,
yeah.
it's 7 is a JavaScript application the same way that Volto is
Yes.
a JavaScript application, but it's not the only way.
I think it's good to point out that we're not doing more things on the front end that we were doing before. We're doing the same things better, probably, or let's say in a more contemporary way, right? Well, we could be doing more things. Maybe we're doing more things on the server, but we're sort of doing the same
It will
things.
sort of make it easier for them to be a new category of backend developers writing JavaScript.
Also that, yeah. Yes. So to summarize, React Router 7 is a React framework. Well, it's a JavaScript framework to build applications with React. It introduces a good separation of concerns among code that runs on the server and code that runs on the client. Well, code that runs on the server to fetch data, mutate data, and code that is rendering the HTML. That will also run on the server and the client, same as Razzle, but we have more server code or clearer separation with server code. And that is done with loaders and actions that are run in the routes. If you want to tackle Plone 7 things and issues at the sprint or at home or both, like at home for the sprint, if you're doing, I don't know, widgets for the editor, you are probably building things that are in CMS UI package, I would assume. What is that? Or components, right? In components, yeah, sure. Or both. Yes, you're right. We decided the other day. So in the components package, it's widgets code, and that is going to be used in the CMS UI package. Where is this? Yes, there's Tailwind version of the components and the regular version of a lot more components here. If you are building blocks for the UI, there is a block package for that. So you're probably working there and then adding blocks. So like you're probably spinning up a Plone backend with Volto, adding blocks through Volto, and then running 7 and seeing that it works correctly. And then everything looks more or less the same. Styles for the block views, the content views belong in the theming package. And it's just a styles folder with CSS, literally that. If you want to build, I don't know, the search page, I don't know, any other public facing route, I can only think of the search page now. Contact form, yes. All of those need to be created as routes in the public UI package. If you want to build a sharing page, the history view, all of those things belong in the CMS UI package as routes. I don't know. Like for example, you want to build the language selector. Go create a component. Go put it in the public UI route for the for the application. This is very likely a lot for people that are used to Volto. For people that are not used to Volto, this probably sounds new to everybody that hasn't already worked with Remix or React Router. We're at the stage where most of the code that we have is framework code, and we don't have much Plone code on top of it. So a lot of it needs to be built. So if you want to build something, build it, and then we can discuss how to refine it. That would be my suggestion. So don't bother too much about what's our convention, how do we do this specific styling thing, where do I put this code. Build the thing, and then we can talk about, hey, you should move the code here, move the code there. Because you could have ideas that we didn't have. I don't know, we're building the thing basically from scratch. And I'm talking about not the interface code. I'm talking about the framework code. We're building all the framework code from scratch, all the repository code placement mostly from scratch. So you could have ideas that we didn't have. So build the thing, and then we'll talk. I guess that's it, unless there's more questions. Yeah, those would be my suggestions. And then while you build the things, you will have questions, because it would take me 200 hours course to give you all the information about everything React Router, everything routes, Plone 7, whatever. So start building the thing, ask questions, build the actual thing. We'll talk. That's my suggestion. Any more questions? Okay. Awesome.